All right, well, I'd like to welcome everyone to today's virtual Lunch and Learn, a demo of a federal government SA&A solution developed by Iceberg and RSA. My name is Glenn Gower from Iceberg, and I'll be your moderator today. Joining me are two of my colleagues here at Iceberg's office in Canada. David Pearson is our CTO and a senior GRC consultant, and Siva Sivaraja is a GRC solution developer. Now, I'll hand things over to David and Siva in just a moment. But before I do, I'd like to encourage everyone in our audience listening in today to send any questions you have throughout the call. Just look for the Q&A pod on your screen. We are also recording today's event, so we'll send that link out to you afterwards. You can share that with your colleagues. And with that, without further ado, I'd like to turn things over to David Pearson. David.
Yeah, hi there. So my name is David Pearson, as Glenn indicated. So just a little bit about myself is that I've been in the risk management consulting business for quite a lot of years now. I've done a fair bit of work with the federal government of Canada and cut my teeth in the world of certification and accreditation, which has evolved into SA&A, the Security Assessment and Authorization. The consulting world got me going in the same sort of, I think, world that everybody's in today, which is a lot of spreadsheets, a lot of information gleaned from the various regulatory documents. That I was thrilled to see was the implementation of ITSG 33. So I'm assuming everybody on the call is familiar with that. But I was an advocate that I was very respectful of the work that the U.S. government had done, the work that NIST has done to catalog a lot of these things. And I was actually advocating that the Canadian government should take FSMA, scratch out the word the United States right in Canada, and just fuel NIST to provide us with the good work that they had done. So as I say, when ITSG 33 came out, I thought it was a very good thing for Canada. Anyway, I guess the starting point of this presentation is why SA&A. And I think this goes to an economic theory that says that economic performance can actually be traced through to confidence in government. And while that's a pretty weak connection, the fact is that government is typically required to do SA&A by policy. And so why are government organizations required to do this? And a lot of it has to do with just building trust that risk is being managed. And while you rarely hear in question period, when did the minister accept the risk associated with something or other, it's normally a more challenging question than that. And a lot of that is because the typical public does not understand that you don't eliminate risk, you manage it. But the SA&A process is all about managing risk in a manner that helps the government at least maintain a level of confidence and trust around the activities they're doing, which should ultimately be the right thing. So one of the challenges, though, is that the SA&A process is a very manual process. And there are a number of tools out there that people have developed over time. A lot of them are based on Excel spreadsheets. But the challenges of SA&A is still that it deals with a very large amount of information, has a lot of manual editing of documents and spreadsheets, and it's very difficult to get a really trusted, transparent view of risk for the person who's doing the authorization. There's a few really kind of key items in here. One is the lack of follow-up. So there have been now several Auditor General reports indicating that government organizations are failing to follow up on recommendations from the various kinds of assessments, privacy assessments, threat risk assessments, and so on. And so a big part of that is that the recommendation typically gets put into an appendix associated with a risk assessment of some sort, and the risk assessment gets put in a drawer and it gets logged as an accepted document. But the fact is that the follow-up items, the POAM, are not segregated out and treated with their own life cycle. They're considered part of the assessment. So that's a particular one where I think a tooling solution can add enormous value. There are some other really critical problems here. One is the information silos. And if you look at, just the challenge of dealing with the fact that the infrastructure for information systems may be delivered by shared services or by another service provider. And so you need that organization to be able to do their own, the input assessments and so on for SA&A, and then provide you with good information for you to be able to assess your risk. And so this applies for, the people inside shared services where they need to assess risk, for the consuming organization. And let's take that kind of worst case scenario where you've got an organization like PSPC who is delivering information systems for the government as a whole. And so now a consumer organization needs to understand the output from PSPC and SSC and put it all together and understand the vulnerabilities they're exposed to and the risk of putting their information into the system. So there's a huge amount of information that has to flow between all of the organizations and then produce a consistent output to be able to actually accept the risk of putting a system or service into operation. So this particular slide I chuckled at the other day because it shows a lot of spreadsheets, but they happen to be financial spreadsheets. So, but I guess the point is that there are a lot of documents. A lot of them are based on Microsoft Excel. They have huge, rows and columns full of information, and they need to be shared. People need to be able to update them, and I think this is not working for people anymore. So what we're going to be looking at today is how we've taken that very manual process, and although it isn't necessarily push button and everything happens, there's still a fair amount of personal, people need to contribute to this. But we're going to be looking at a product called Archer from RSA, Archer being a Governance, Risk, and Compliance, or GRC software product. Archer is a software product that has a very large suite of GRC functions that it can deliver. There are things like business resiliency for business continuity management, risk assessment, audit management. There's third-party governance functionality. So it's a large suite of tools that all work together on the same platform. The benefit of having it in one platform is that it's the data, it becomes integrated. So when you have a risk, you can associate it with a control. You can associate that with an externally applied policy. If you need to do, if the risk says you need to do business continuity management of some sort, then it's all tied together in the same system. So these are all there's a large number of building blocks. We're going to be very focused today on just the federal government SA&A solution, which was initially developed for the U.S. DoD, expanded into other U.S. government agencies. And in recent times, we've added the various Canadian content into it and Canadian processes. So we're going to be looking at a solution that is now very Canadian-centric. There are other federal government functions, continuous monitoring, for example, which is very much what it sounds like. We won't be touching on that today from a demo perspective, but it's worth noting that it's there. So just I'll hand this off to Siva in just a moment, but I think the key here is that there are a lot of people involved in SA&A, and they all need to be able to share information. So Siva, why don't you pick it up from there?
Yeah, and thank you, David, for that. So David, you said you pretty much signified why SA is important and what's today's approach. So what I'm going to talk about a little bit in more detail about what SA&A is and how it's done today. So over the last 5 years or so, Iceberg was engaged with different departments within the government to understand their process and common challenges governing the SA&A process. During our engagement, our intention was to propose a feasible, effective, and efficient to mitigate these challenges that they were facing. I wanted to start off my slide with what were the main challenges that we identified or that was being faced today and why, and then later talk about our solution along with the demo. So As you know, the SA&A lifecycle is a very document-centralized process where there are several documents shared within roles to assess and authorize the system. Each role depends on these documentations to accurately complete their task before the next handoff. And so the use of spreadsheet is a very common go-to tool by many organizations and departments as a method to manage the documentation. It gets the job done eventually. However, with many organizations and departments, what fails to realize is this the most efficient way or effective way of managing the SA&A process, knowing that it's a document-centralized process? So the main challenges that were faced with it and what we saw was that there was a lack of visibility. Roles were being misinformed and not informed at all, or information is disconnected or lacks context. The reason being is this image visualizes that as the SA&A process within the project grows, the growth of the spreadsheets and documents get larger, and as departments roll out more SA&A projects, the volume grows exponentially, eventually forming the snowball effect that drives confused and poor decisions. Another challenge in today's process is reporting. So what we realized is, as we were engaging the departments, that reports were done, data was parsed manually from multiple Excel documents to generate a report. This task itself takes days to weeks to compile manually, while in some circumstances it's driven through or by inaccurate information. So what are we doing to resolve this? The joy of consolidating and centralizing your SA&A process in one platform, such as GRC Archer, it mitigates most of the challenges. The added value by consolidating the data is your SA&A project, its ability to build global and personal reports across the different SA&A attributes, which is reflected by real-time data. This allows the end user to be accurately informed and provides the visibility at their fingertips. Personal and global dashboards can be configured to display reports to provide visibility to relevant information for their needs. As a result, the user can be informed, make confident decisions, and trust it in an effective and efficient way. On the screen, we have an example of an exportable project summary report that is composed of data extracted out of the GRC Archer platform. Reports such as this are exportable on demand. So I'm going to show you a couple more examples of the types of reports that we can pretty much export out of Archer. Here we have dashboards that are presentable online, so there's no need to export them. And so this comes over to my next slide. So through our experience meeting with different departments, this seems to have the most positive feedback. The slide visually demonstrates the fundamentals of documentation and management of security controls within the SA&A process, where I believe at least most of you may agree that the bulk of the amount of work is done and where most of the time it takes to complete the SA&A process. During this stage, it is also where you adequately document what your system does, what your information system will consume, and what controls are implemented and how it will be assessed. So how do we make this process efficient, knowing that it is where most bulk of the amount of work is done and it's the most time-consuming part of the process? We automated the tasks we automate some of these tasks where most of the time is spent during the stages. So starting from the right to the left, from the left to the right, I'm sorry, the common control catalog. Let me just point it right here. The Common Control Catalog contains a library of control standards such as annual assessment objectives such as the ICSG 33 that David was mentioning, the NIST, and departmental specific control standards. Upon identifying, going over to the profiles column here, is where you identify the impact levels. The solution will select and allocate the controls to your SA&A project that meets the criteria by making a copy of the controls to your SA&A project. Once the controls are allocated to the project, the security practitioners will document their training details to each of the controls under the tailoring column. Services. If any of the services, for example, such as physical environmental data center controls have been identified during the documentation, the security controls identified in leveraging services will be made available to be leveraged into your system during the tailoring process. This eliminates the need to duplicate the effort to reassess the controls that have already been assessed initially at the leverage service. Once the security practitioners completed the tailoring of the controls, the assessors will be able to address the controls through the instructions outlined in the assessment objectives or the test plans and provide their findings accordingly via a plan of action and milestones. So without any further delay, I'm going to take you into a live demo of what the GRC Archer platform can provide in regards to SA&A. Over.
I want to break in for a second with a question. It's Glenn Gower here. For probably towards David as Civic gets the demo environment going. We had a question around what maturity level would be typical for a department that we've talked to so far, or maybe what would you recommend as a maturity level? What kind of a state should departments be at before they would be able to jump into a tool like this?
Maturity level. So if we look at the capability maturity model, I would say the fact that people are using Microsoft Excel and have a process in place puts them at about a maturity level 2, maybe a little bit higher, lower, depending on how they're actually managing their process. And that would be a typically good starting point. If people are not doing SA&A today and are hoping that a tool is going to suddenly leapfrog them into a leadership state, I don't think that's practical to do. But if your project management processes are fairly well articulated and you've got a good method of managing that, then this just slides into that well. So I'm going to sort of push the actual maturity requirement onto the project management organization, because that's really where it all starts.
Okay, thanks.
All right, so this is GRC Archer itself. Right off the bat, this is a slick user interface where it's user-friendly for the users. At the very top of your window, you have the main navigation menu, which contains the different SA&A workspaces, such as the Federal Enterprise Management, the Security Assessment and Authorization. If I just scroll out of this a little bit, because I think I zoomed in too much, you will be able to see the continuous monitoring as well. Right below that, you have dashboards. Dashboards are composed of different iViews to provide a consolidated view of records within each workspace. Like SharePoint, Archer dashboards can be configured to present different types of views such as calendars, quick links, and summary reports. However, the capability of Archer is the dashboards reflect on real-time data. Therefore, right off your landing page, right off when you log in, you are exposed to relevant and accurate information. As a result, the platform can provide an aggregated view that is informational, such as projects by security category, projects submitted by authorization, or even furthermore, if you feel like projects submitted by pre-assessment, or projects by logic security zones, or projects by risk, or process-based reports where you can see at what stage an SA&A project is at the moment of its time. Depending on your role, role-based dashboards can also be configured to provide you the visibility and relevant information specifically to that role. As you can see, we have a dashboard for ADMs, for ISOs, SCAs, and AOs. These dashboards can be made available to only those that are granted access to view those dashboards. Or you can make global dashboards or standard dashboards such as authorization dashboards and control dashboards for general users. Another added advantage is that the end users can create private or global reports on demand or personal dashboards without the need of an administrator. Right up here, we can add new. And another feature I feel like is something that Archer has provided is the capability of drilling into these reports right off your iViews. So, for example, you may wonder like what type of SA&A projects are at the ATO level. We know that there's 4, but by clicking into it, we can gain additional information of what the project is, the type of project, the methodology that's used, the ATO date that was approved at, and the expiration date. So just to look into a completed SA&A project, for example, the Infectious Disease Information Management System. Oh, it's a little bit big. Let's scroll out of there. Right off the bat, we see the project lifecycle indicator. This indicates the completion status of each project gate. Under the General tab, actually before I go there, I wanted to point out the methodology that can be used. So this is where we can pick whether it's ITSG 33, NIST, FedRAMP, or SSC, which is a Departmental Controls Category Library. Once you identify the type of methodology that this authorization package will be using, you will go into the General tab to provide the preliminary details of the SA&A project, such as the name, the type, whether it is an information type or program, the control set version, and the acceptable risk of the project. There's also an option where the project managers can decide if the control assessment for the project will be done offline or online using the spreadsheet yet to govern the SA&A project. If they decide to do it online, they will be able to do the full SA&A lifecycle within the platform. With the offline option, they can still do the control assessment offline, but yet govern the SA&A within the platform itself. Based on the type of project that is selected, whether it be informational or program, Archer dynamically updates its form to display and capture relevant information. In this case, since we are using an information system detail, only the information system relevant information is asked. However, if you were to choose program, then this section would not be appearing to the end user, but it will be more for programs. Going down to the bottom, we have a stakeholder section. This is where the project manager will be able to identify who will own the role within the SA&A process. Only those identified in this project will have access to edit, read, and update the project. There's also a use of having multiple users to be selected, and this can always be updated at any point of the SA&A project. For the ones you see with the red asterisk, these are required information that needs to be provided by the project manager. Other than that, if there's no red asterisk, those are additional information optional to the user. At the bottom here, where we have the different types of gates, this is where document management for each project gates will be captured. We provide a link for the user to download the respective document templates on the GC Wiki, and after that, it can be tailored towards the needs and attached back into Archer. This would not take you out of the Archer page. However, it will open a new tab, so you can always come back to, so you'll never lose where you left off in your platform. The task is repeated throughout all the gates of the project management, so through 1 to 6, where all the stakeholders involved will have the visibility to download and view any relevant documentation for this SA&A project. So going over to the Boundary tab. Under the Boundary tab, give me a second to load here, the user can identify what operating services will be consumed or leveraged in the system. Suppose your information system is hosted in a data center which typically has numerous security services. The controls implemented from the hosting provider, such as the network remote access that we have here, security controls, for example, will be made available to be leveraged into your SA&A project during the tailoring process. The obvious benefit of common controls is to eliminate the need for redundant development and operations for security controls by multiple system owners. Additionally, common controls provide the consistency needed to drive effectiveness towards the SA&A process. Through this solution, we are just able to achieve that. Under the Security tab, the users will be able to select the different types of information from a library of defined information. Each information type is associated with a confidentiality, an integrity, and availability rating. If you have multiple information types selected, the system will recommend the highest selected information type as for your categorization. If you don't agree with the recommendation, There is an option to override, which will result as the final categorization selected for the system. There's also in this tab where the user can identify the different types of logical zones the system will access. If an override selection is made, then a justification will be required by the user. Going over to the Controls tab, give it a second for it to load. The user can allocate controls by either profile, logical zones, or by both. With a click of a button, the system will make a copy of all the controls that have met the criteria and allocate them to your SA&A project. This task is one of the most time-consuming tasks in the process that we're able to achieve within minutes. Coming down here, once we've allocated controls have been selected, the practitioners can validate their controls to ensure that the adequate controls to address the security requirements through the control summary dashboard. If they are not satisfied, the practitioners can add controls manually to satisfy the requirements as going up here. This dashboard presents the slice and dice of a dump of all the controls that are consumed in your system. To ensure, so once the system has allocated the controls, it will be identified or presented in this section at the bottom here. The practitioners will be able to view all the allocated controls from this view with giving them the general information of what kind of controls have been allocated to their project. As you can see, it gives you the name, the overall status, the domain, and if there's a control inheritance available from the services they're leveraging from. So going into one where we have leverage services at the bottom here. This is where the practitioner can identify that these controls have a common control that can be inherited. As you can see, the solution identifies the controls that are available to be leveraged by saying yes or no for the ones that don't have common controls available. From this tab, the practitioner can click into here, click into the control, scroll to the bottom, and select the control they'd like to inherit from. For example, second, there you go.
So in case it's not obvious, maybe I'll just comment that when you're looking at leverage controls, a lot of those are going to be coming from a service provider, shared services a lot of the time. And so you may have shared services actually do their own control assessment and then offer that the control is being delivered by the particular service that's being consumed. So this allows you to have a consolidated view of all of the controls that need to be available in the system that combines both the controls that you're responsible for and the controls that the service provider is responsible for.
Most definitely, yes. That actually brings me back to the point, because under the control summary table, if I go on the top there, it gives you the consolidated view, like an aggregated view of all the controls. As you can see, there's about 443 controls that have been allocated to this project. Of that, we can see that there's a control options, of the 443 controls, some controls have the leverage option from the common controls that's been identified in the boundary tab. So from here, the practitioner can kind of decide how many controls they can leverage from the services, how many controls, if they have enough controls to meet their security requirements as far as access control goes, administrating and audit, and so on and forth. So to go into a control itself, assuming that a practitioner is in making the tailoring process at this point, they'll be able to drill into that right from the project and they will be able to view and edit the additional information of the control and tailor it towards their needs. As you can see, most of these fields are editable by the user, where they can update the control name, control parameters, add profile-specific notes, supplemental guidance, and on forth. At the bottom, they can provide the allocation status, where they like to allocate or leverage, but we can see that there's no controls inheritance available for this control to be leveraged. At the bottom tab here, we have 4 tabs. The control detail provides additional information of the control itself, the control family, and on forth, the type priority, the monitoring type, and enhancements if it's available. The implementation details, where the practitioner adds how they plan on implementing this control. They have the option to hybrid a control, where they can take in a common control, but yet implement it the way they want it to, and not have to go the way the control has been implemented through the service or inherited service. The control type in place, control subtypes, and the detail of how they plan implementing this control. Once they provide that, they'll provide a status where it's been partially met, not met, or fully met, and then it tells you about who it's been completed by and when this implementation has been updated. This is also where the assessor provides the assessment details. As mentioned earlier, the assessment objectives are also pre-populated as the controls allocated to the project. This is where, as a result of this, we're able to maintain the consistency of how controls are assessed throughout all the programs by different assessors. So clicking into an assessment objective, we can see it tells you what the objective of the assessment is, the procedures that they should be following, and they can provide what method they've used, and whether it's satisfied, not assessed, or unsatisfied. They can also provide additional comments and add any supporting documentations as an attachment to this test plan. So coming back to the project, and up to the control summary, we're able to analyze all the controls, and in this case 430 controls, to see how much of those were addressed to the implementation. As you can see in this sense, only 36% of the controls have been addressed. That has either been met or fully met. That has been either leveraged or fully met. Controls that are not satisfied are managed through a plan of action and milestone workflow. Depending on how your department addresses findings, forms can be addressed to each or multiple controls. For this demo, we grouped all our controls findings under one plan of action and milestone. So going over to the Authorization tab, there's a pre-check list to ensure that all required documentations are checked. In this sense, we check if the authorization boundary has been defined, has a security category been defined, checked, if has all the controls been allocated, checked, and if of all the controls that have been allocated, if there's been if they have defined the implementation details have been along with it. So once you assume that all these have been checked, the assessor, when they are ready, can export a security assessment report directly out of Archer for the AO to review. In this sense, a document will look something up about this. And this can be exported within minutes. In here, we're able to extract data out of the platform because we're able to consolidate all the SA&A process in here and provide a template of information that the AO, the assessor, can review. And give you stakeholder names, the executive summary, the mission, and whatnot. It goes down to what services are being leveraged and a copy of the control summary as well, which has been allocated, integrated, and the implementation status of that. We're also able to extract the control detail assessments how it's been implemented, the assessment objective, and the methods used, and the comments that have been applied to the controls itself. It is also here that we're able to see what the acceptable risk is, see how we did for each milestone or each gate, if all the documentation has been accepted. And once we've accepted all of this, the AO can make a decision whether they like to through a work cycle, through a workflow, whether they like to accept this recommendation or not. And it's here where we submitted it, and where's the ATO? Oh, yeah, past it. Submitted. Yeah, it's been blocked because I don't have access to it. But this is where they can say whether it's been authorized to operate or what are some of the other
Interim authority.
Yeah. Yeah. So coming back to the plan of action milestones, as I mentioned, plan of action milestones can also be addressed for other findings, such as controls, PIA findings, or BIA findings that are being pretty much captured throughout the SA&A process. As you can see, they all have their own priority and their own life cycle as they go along with it. If you click into address control finding, you'll be able to see which controls this plan of action addresses for estimated and actual levels, and who is the owner and the reviewer of this plan of actions. Also along this, you'll be able to add attachments and keep track of a history of how far this and who's made updates to this record. And that is pretty much as far as SA&A goes, right?
Yeah, so maybe just one additional comment about the POAM is that while you see that the POAM records here are associated with this particular project, they're actually their own data object inside Archer, so that you can get a consolidated view for your department or organization of all of the POAM items that are in progress or completed, so that you can track those items external from the actual authorization package itself. Yep. They become living items that that have their own life cycle. Yep. I think that's the only addition.
Yep. And so, Glenn, is there any questions that have come up?
Yeah, we had one question. Also, we'd like to invite any additional questions while we're going here. But Steve, I wonder if you could navigate back to the control screen that you had up. It's kind of a report or
Yep.
We had a question about that, and it was just about where the data is coming from. Is it real time? Just looking for more information about how that particular report or summary is built.
No worries. So once the petitioner has allocated the controls based on the categorization, the controls get filled here. It makes a copy of the controls from the control library, and it populates it under this section. That is what drives this report here. It is real time, and it always gets updated based on any changes that have been done at the bottom of the controls, to any of the individual controls at the bottom here. The report itself extracts specific information from the controls itself, so we can identify what controls that have been allocated are access controls by its control family or control area. So this kind of gives, from a petitioner's perspective, are they able to address all the required security controls for this SA&A project? This is usually where it takes a bulk of time, because not only do you have to ensure the accuracy of the control you're taking place in, but before you hand it off to the next person, and the life cycle comes back that the gaps that you haven't addressed, we're kind of trying to mitigate that gaps here, in the sense that they're able to see that visually, address them before they hand it off to the next person. So this section right here, that just highlighted more geared towards the petitioner when they are um, tailoring a document their control. And this section here is more for the investors. That they're able